The views and opinions expressed in these historical letters that may contain vernacular used in the World War II era, the post-war era, and the Cold War era do not reflect the views and opinions of any of the individuals involved with this project, including, but not limited to, the podcast's creators. Morning, Jamie. How are you this morning?
Well, I got my coffee. Do you have your coffee?
Very important. Yep, need our
Let's have your
coffee.
We have our badge.
Oh, yes, wearing the badge.
Always.
We're still in Ottumwa, or are we today?
I don't.
Is Sweetie going on vacation?
She was very, very busy.
Yeah.
She had a lot of stuff that she had to do.
But today, Sweetie's finally going to get to meet the in-laws in Pennsylvania because she's got to leave. So does Lou. And it's time to take that first big trip out of Iowa without her parents, just with Lou. Lou and Sweetie are going to head to Pennsylvania, specifically to the Philadelphia area, to meet his parents. And this has caused anxiety for many weeks for Sweetie. Oh. She's been darning a lot of socks.
She's been cleaning and packing.
Yep. She was up to her arms in grime from the base because the janitor wasn't even going to go through.
Let's not forget, too, that while she was doing all this stuff, she was also working. And it was a very big project. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, big projects. And speaking of the base, by the way, for fans of the Love Sweetie podcast and for the people in Iowa, really, especially for the people in Ottumwa, there's a very special episode, a bonus episode of the Love Sweetie podcast that when this airs is available on both the audio platform and the YouTube channel. It's about an hour-long interview with the president of the Friends of NAS Ottumwa, Stephen Black, and he goes into the full restoration efforts, the preservation of the old Naval Air Station, NAS Ottumwa, as well as some of the history of the base. So if you've been craving that deep dive into the military history, some of us really get excited about, we want to talk about all of the process and the planes and everything that's going on and with the current restoration efforts and what happened in the past, please check out that episode. It's a very important episode. The amount of effort that the average person has put in to saving this piece of history in Ottumwa, Iowa is super important. So we really strongly encourage everybody to check that out. But today, we're going to leave Iowa. We're going to go to Philadelphia area. And Jamie, I was thinking last night before we were recording this episode this morning, just about the name Philadelphia. It's so, so special. And I wonder, do you know what it means?
No, I live on the western part of Pennsylvania. So I know what Pittsburgh comes from, but I do not know where Philadelphia comes from.
Right. So let's take the word apart because we have really two main parts of the word. So we have Phila on one side, and we have Delphia on the other. And it's really coming, I believe, from the Greek terms. So we have philos, that means loving or dear. Now, if you think about it, when you have a phobia of something, you're in fear of something. So philos is the opposite of phobos.
Oh, phobia and philos.
Yeah. Phobos is actually really interesting. I was thinking about that last night. Side note, Phobos being fear. That's one of the moons of Mars. We never talk about Martian moons, at least not too frequently. There's 2 moons in Mars. Everybody should know this. Phobos is one of them. So it's like the god of war has the god of fear, and Deimos is the other, the god of terror going around it. Yeah, it has a really fast orbit. I think it orbits in like a day around Mars. Can you imagine a moon spinning around Mars that quickly? It's because it's all that anxiety from the fear. But Philadelphia, opposite. Philos, right? Means loving or dear. And then Delphia is coming from Delphos, which is brotherly love. So Philadelphia is known as the city of brotherly love. And it's one of the rare cities, I think, that the slogan matches the actual name meaning. So when we talk about the city of brotherly love being Philadelphia, it's literally in the meaning of the name itself. So if anybody was ever wondering about where that came from, it's been there the whole time. You've always known, but you just didn't know. So I wanted to actually say that. And then before we get into the letters, I also wanted to talk, because we've talked about the train travel a lot. She's going to have this big day-long train trip.
24-hour, not an 8-hour day, a
No.
24-hour trip.
This
Yes.
is a long, and she's going to describe it, and we're going to get into that. But before we go through, I wanted people to see the route, because train travel in the country in the late 30s and the early 40s is very different than what it looks like today. Today, a lot of people, they're going to take airplanes to go, obviously, across the country. But then that's really the primary mode for cross-country travel, is still going to be the trains. And so I was really happy. I went over to one of my favorite little stores around here in Peddler's Village. Shout out again to What's in a Name. They're the ones that did the crests, the embroidered crest that we saw in an earlier episode. They also feature antique maps, and they had at the front, and just some things are meant to happen. They had at the front some separated out from the Rand McNally atlases from 36 to 44. And what happened, if you know the name Rand McNally for maps a lot, what happened, they explained at the store, was in the 36 to 44 time, Rand McNally released a series of maps. I do have the auto routes, and I do have the plane routes as well. Today we'll take a look at the train routes. The Rand McNally, basically, this is the time where people are starting to really travel for leisure outside of their state. And Rand McNally wanted to encourage the travel. So they produced these maps to make it easier for people to understand what all the routes were. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen here so you can take a look at the train map. And my dad, when he was looking at this map, he said, look what we've lost. And like, there's a little bit of a depression here with viewing this. These are the train routes across the United States. This map is dated 36 to 44. So this is exactly the map, the routes that would have existed when Sweetie's going to do this traveling.
If you look, for those that are on the audio, like you can see around Chicago, around the base of Lake Michigan.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, you can see all where all of the hubs are. It's amazing. I would have expected a little bit more.
Yeah, and there's individual lines for sure. These are the majors.
These are the majors.
So what it's saying at the bottom line here, I'm just going to read it so that our audio listeners and everybody can hear. The above map shows the principal railroad systems of the United States with the names of the railroads and the distances between the larger cities along their routes. So I'll zoom in here in a moment and where Sweetie's going to go so we can see this. It's interesting to note the few railroad lines in the west compared with the large number of lines east of the Mississippi River. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. So if we're starting in Des Moines, I'm going to call it two areas because this is going to come up again very soon. We can see here Kansas City is a major hub on the western portion of Missouri. This is the Missouri River, Kansas on the other side, but that's a major hub. And that's where Union Station is going to be. This is going to come up in a number of episodes coming. But right above it, if we go north, we see Des Moines, and that's the capital of Iowa. So you can see
I can see. Yes.
And this is about the spot where she's going to be taking off. Now, Ottumwa is just a little to the southeast of Des Moines. And we can see that Kansas City to Des Moines is marked, I think it's 230 or 280 miles. So we can see these numbers being listed along the side there. Now, Des Moines goes straight to Chicago, and that's one of the big hubs. And this is not unusual to think. If we think about O'Hare, right? International Airport is one of the major airports. That's a lot of like transfer flights that people take from the east to get to the west coast. The rail lines are no different. And then there's a line that's going directly, so we can expect that the line being taken by Sweetie is this Pennsylvania line. We can see the PA here. Chicago, and it goes to Pittsburgh directly and then continues on to Philadelphia.
It goes through Harrisburg.
Through Harrisburg, yeah. And that's basically the turnpike route.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. It basically follows the modern turnpike. If we look from Chicago, I think it says like 460 or so miles from Chicago, leading all the way to the next big stop, which is Pittsburgh, and then another 245 leading to Harrisburg, and another 104 leading from Harrisburg to Philadelphia. So in total, I think we have about 800 miles of rail that they're going to cross here.
So you can definitely see from here what tracks they would be taking and like where she would be going through. That would be a beautiful. I can see it's going through northern Ohio.
Yes.
Flat.
Yeah.
Flat. I hope that she had something to read. But this is incredible. This is really incredible. And so a lot of these lines are no longer
exist. I mean, Amtrak still runs trains. But it's not like the old days. If we think about, especially west of Chicago, as we head towards Omaha and all these other areas, Minneapolis and leading in. I mean, it's really like a beautiful, like it looks like little stars all across the map where these hubs are, and you can tell immediately where the major ones are.
Sure, they heard trains all the time.
All the
I mean,
time.
I lived in a smaller town that had trains, and we lived closer to the track, so I was used to hearing them. But yeah, I can imagine how much different, like the sound of the environment, with this was the major form of travel, and cars, and some cars still.
And then the other document that we have here, I'm going to go ahead and close this one, is actually the other side of the map. And originally, I didn't know the other side of the map had this, and I pulled it out, and I should have just read the document that Wilson and Name gave me, because it's like, hey, bonus, there's this really great content on the other side of the map. And then I really looked at it, and I was astounded, because right now when we think about trains, we think about like Amtrak, being the major line that's running. These are the companies, these are the principal railroads of the United States. And there's so many listed. It's not just like Amtrak and everybody else. It's a lot of major principal railroads. So what this document says is a list that includes the largest and most important. The largest and most important, meaning it's not exclusive. This is
not a comprehensive list. There's others.
Of the railroad systems in the United States, showing the routes of the main lines and their chief branches. So we can also go through here, by the main cities, and we can say, here are the lines and which company is operating the routes, which is really, really great. So, and they're alphabetized. Here's Pennsylvania, Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, Philadelphia to New York. This is the Pennsylvania line. Here's the Reading Railroad, right? If you play Monopoly.
If you play Monopoly, we all did.
There's the Reading Railroad. So, yeah.
What were the other ones? I don't remember.
That.
All I remember is Reading. That's all I remember, because we were like, oh, it's Reading. No.
Reading. Yes. Reading. Let's, for anybody playing Monopoly that has always said it's the Reading Railroad, it's not. So permanently fix that in your minds. It's the Reading Railroad. I love, actually, I haven't even noticed this. I'm going to have to call this out to my mother. The town that my mother grew up in is listed here. It's a little town, Likens, Pennsylvania. On the Reading, they did have a train station in town. So Likens, Pennsylvania is the little town where they're from. We've also, right below, got the St. Louis line, and you just see, it's just an amazing listing. There is nothing like this today. So in addition to all those routes, to have all these different companies operating the lines, and the train experts, if you're listening to this and you're a fan of train history, I know these guys are intense. They're really fans of train history. I'm sure they know all of the routes of all of these lines, and probably the timetables to go with them for when the trains are going to leave each day. That's usually what the train guys memorize, is how this works. So we'll have to see if we can get some train guys on the podcast to really talk about some of these lines. Here's an Iowa line, the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific. Rock Island is out by Moline. That's out by the Quad Cities, if I recall correctly. Yeah, here's Davenport via St. Joseph, Missouri, and Topeka, Kansas. But yeah, lots to Chicago. Probably the biggest hub on the map.
It looked like the biggest hub. Yeah, it looked like everything was coming into Chicago.
Yeah, but really an interesting document. I am sure you could just look up one train company, one line from here, and find a host of documentation just about how the trains operated in your local area. And I really encourage people to do that. It's really interesting. These things are gone. We drive past old train stations. We drive over old railroad lines that have sort of gone away. They're not restored. They're not in use anymore. One of those lines might be on this map, right? That might have been the major avenue of travel. So it's a really fascinating history. And I thought it was just too cool not to bring it up, since Sweetie's going to go to Philadelphia. Here's the way that she's going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here, and we'll get into the first of two letters. The first letter is the absolute biggest. This is the trip to Pennsylvania.
Yes, let's get into probably one of my favorite letters. I know I've said this before, but this is a good one.
Yep. And I'm just so excited so we can talk about Philadelphia. So
without further ado.
Yep. 936 Springfield Road, Collegeville, Pennsylvania, March 11th, 1944. Dear Mom, Pop, Jeanne, Sister, Bill, M.A., and Chris. I borrowed paper from Elizabeth, and I'm ashamed not to have brought some. I can't ask for more. This will have to be a typical round robin. We have to pause here. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so Sweetie has been preparing for this trip.
Mm-hmm.
She has been packing, she has been doing all these things and making sure she has everything.
Mm-hmm.
And she forgot to bring stationery.
Of all the things that
Of
Sweetie
all
forgot.
the things. And I know that probably a lot of the people, like when we plan trips, I'm
Mm-hmm.
always like very anxious and I always forget something.
Yep.
I always forget something.
Yep.
And this is really funny that
She forgot her
that's the one
stationery.
thing
So now she has to borrow from Elizabeth. Yep. And the
which is
round
probably,
robin. Look at the list of people this is going to. So one person's going to get the letter and then they're going to pass it along. And we know the final person had to be Jeanne because she kept it.
yeah, so keep it.
Yep. But Jean's the final recipient.
Let's see. Lou had to go out to the station at about 10:30 to get his leave papers at midnight on Tuesday night. He came home, took a bath, and shaved, and made it to bed at about 1:30. We got up and ate and left the house at 5:15. The train was on time, and though we'd lost our reservations due to the change in leave, we found seats. At Burlington, Lou asked another lady to trade seats with me, and from Burlington into Chicago, we sat together. We left a blizzard in Ottumwa. It was bitter cold, too. It was just as bad in Chicago. We got in there at 9:40 or thereabouts, and after plowing through the station, we checked the bags and walked a couple of blocks to a restaurant to eat. The station had been decorated with a myriad of smaller airplanes suspended from the roof, all in formation. They were really nice. The place was overrun with servicemen. Lots of them were men on leave, while there were groups with full pack and equipment waiting for troop trains. We bought some picture postcards to send out, but at the station I couldn't buy any stamps. And besides, we found that at 10 till 11, the doors were crammed with people waiting on our Philadelphia train. So we had to abandon our card sending in favor of being mauled to keep our place as near the front of the crowd.
I'm just going to pause it here because there's so many details that she's going over about this experience of traveling.
Mm-hmm.
We were expecting the troop trains. There was concern that the routes would be delayed because of troops movement. Mm-hmm. But I love this line here, Jamie, that says, we found that at 10 till 11, the doors were crammed with people waiting on the Philadelphia train. So we had to abandon our card sending in favor of being mauled. Just this line of, well, it's more important to be mauled to get onto the train to Philadelphia. So you just get you can imagine how many people are so densely packed, desperately trying to get on the regardless of tickets, just trying to make sure they have a good seat because this is going to be a long trip from Chicago to Philadelphia.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and when you see the map, that you had just gone over, you see how many trains were coming into Chicago. Yeah. This must have been like the craziest, busiest place that she'd ever seen. Mm-hmm. And I love too how she like describes the station, and then they obviously had like sort of like this art display with the planes and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like you don't get to see that kind of stuff.
No.
No, not a lot. And then and also, oh gosh, and they were traveling in a blizzard as well.
And yeah, they're leaving a blizzard behind in Ottumwa. I guess that's nice though. You're like, okay, at least we're getting out of the snow that's hitting Ottumwa here. Maybe it'll be a little.
She said it was just as bad in Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, like so the weather was awful that day. So like besides like traveling, right? And I guess they're responsible for their own bags, right? Yep. This isn't like you just check your bag and then it just goes and goes. You have to take it with you. Mm-hmm. Oh gosh.
Yeah, and all the men with the troop, they're all with their military full equipment. Mm-hmm. So then there's all of that, bulk basically just moving around the station. Everybody crammed together trying to get into the trains they need to get to.
Oh, goodness.
We had to show tickets as we went through the door to the ramp leading to the train. I carried the tickets, showed them to the conductor, and as soon as I got squeezed through, I started running to get to the train. I ran blocks, or so it seemed, and people were passing me like I was standing still. We made it to the train, got on, and walked through 3 cars and decided they were all alike, picked out the seat that looked cleanest, and started unloading our junk.
Yeah, and there's just so much here to talk about. So when they're saying we need to get to the front of the crowd, we had to show the tickets as we went through the door to the ramp leading to. Now we're not even on the train. We're just at the ramp, right? And then there's a mad rush to get to the train. And she's like, I'm running. And it's like that you're standing still and people are way ahead of you. And there's just that panic. So she thought she had anxiety preparing for this trip. And she doesn't even say where Lou is. Lou
I know,
is, I
yeah.
guess,
She's like, is everybody for themselves?
yeah, yeah,
She's like, I was running, I was gone.
yeah.
She's little. Like, we know. Sweetie's like a little thing. She's tiny, that she's probably surrounded by servicemen who are on their way to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And I mean, thank God Lou's like really big, tall man that could help. But yeah, she didn't even, he probably was just like, you lead the way, hon.
Yep, you go. Yeah, and we know that she's a Spitfire, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
she's gonna go for whatever she needs to do. And at least, yeah, Lou's taller. But I can imagine getting lost in a crowd like this.
He probably was just trying to keep an eye on her.
Yeah.
We were settled as comfortably as possible when Lou decided he'd wander off to see what could be seen. He went forward one car and found it was a steamliner with reclining chairs and less dirt. So he asked one man to move and sit with another man and gave us a seat together. We again gathered up our suitcases to go to the good car. It was a darn good break for us, for we'd have been sick and worn to a frazzle if we'd ridden for 18 hours on the old car.
Okay, so we also get a description of the cars here, that some of the cars are better than others, so Lou's sourcing out some better seats. He knows it's an 18-hour train ride. And the fact that he found seats with recliners implies that the seats they'd originally been on didn't recline.
Yeah.
So you're just sitting there.
You're just sitting like upright, like
for 18 hours straight. And luckily,
and less dirt. So there was still dirt.
Yeah, and less dirt. Right. So there's still dirt. Yeah. It's too busy to go in and be like, let's clean down, the train. I remember, what is it with the planes and things? They come in, right, and they unload, and then they go through and they clean as best they can, and then they reload. This is not happening on these trains. No, it's like, hey, we got to keep moving. We got troops to move. Lucky if you get a recliner.
It's like 11 o'clock. So yeah, they don't have time. They got stuff to do.
Yeah. So.
Besides, we were well entertained by about 4 good-natured men who intermittently butchered the beer barrel polka and giggled a la Demery at one of the good-natured ones there. We slept part way, but we breathed so much coal smoke and dirt that our faces and noses were black.
And we were just talking about the dirt, right, on the train. Coal smoke, so it's a coal-burning train.
Oh, goodness.
And so that's coming in through the windows. And it's 18 hours of just coal smoke moving through. Gosh, welcome to Pennsylvania. As you go through Harrisburg, you're in the land of coal, right? Yeah, passing by those mountains that have it. So yeah, if people were wondering what type of train, it's blowing coal smoke.
I didn't actually get sick, though I did have a headache part of the way. The biggest gripe was that there was no water on the train, and we had to go from Chicago to Philly without washing our hands and faces. The family was there to meet us: Mom, Pop, Marguerite, and Elizabeth. I don't know quite how to explain or describe them to you, but they're darn nice. We piled into the car and got to 936 Springfield Road. Wonderful place. It didn't sway or lurch like a train.
She was so done with that train.
Yeah. Didn't have any water.
Can you imagine meeting your in-laws for the first time and your face is like covered in dirt?
Yeah.
Like, hey, hi, I'm done.
Yeah. At least we had reclining seats. That was cool. Don't mind my soot-covered face. It's fine. Made it.
Oh, I'm sure. But oh gosh, so Mom and Pop and Marguerite is his younger sister.
Joe's wife.
Joe's wife, okay.
Yeah,
and then Elizabeth. Okay. I'm horrible, and I'm hoping that maybe some of our listeners are also that way, so I can get a little bit of empathy here. But I'm bad with the names, and there's so many Elizabeths.
Yeah, there's a lot of Elizabeths, to be fair.
Elizabeth is his sister,
right?
His older sister, and Marguerite is Joe's wife. Okay,
right, yeah. And then Mom and Pop, yeah, which is nice because I think you brought it up in the other episode that Chester is Daddy. Right, and Laura is Mama. Here, Mom is Sydney and Pop. So we have the different terminology that they use. But they're darn nice. So this is the first meeting with the in-laws with the soot-covered face. Don't worry, sweetie. You have to take the train back to Tumwa at some point. And then they head to what's basically the Delco area, 936 Springfield Road. This is the Upper Darby location, and we've talked about that in previous episodes.
They have big fireplaces in nearly every room. Though they're not used, they do make the place. I can tell you more about that when we get home. We washed, ate breakfast, and went to bed. It was about 7 when we got home, and I expect we went to bed at 9 or something like that. It was about 5 when we got up and dressed. We were going to go into Philly to see Charlie Spivak, but Lou's Uncle Lane and Cousin Reba came over, and we didn't go. It's probably just as well, for we were pretty tired. These Grahams must have a touch of English in them, for every night at bed they congregate at the kitchen table for a cup of tea, chat, and leave words about what time in the morning they're to be called.
Yeah.
That is so, when I read that, I'm like, that's adorable.
Mm-hmm.
They get together and they like have tea and
recap
like
of the day
and say, I'm sleeping until 9.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll not be calling me before 9.
Yes,
And that's just what that, when I read this, I was like, oh, that's what it sounded like in my head.
Yeah.
But she also, they were planning to go to Philadelphia after that long train.
Yeah.
No.
She's like, I need to drink some water.
That would have been awful.
Well, let me do this properly. I need to drink some water. There you go.
He's got to do the Delco accent.
Yeah, there we go. We're in Philadelphia.
Oh, I would have loved to hear what they all sounded like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder if they had. I don't think they really had a very strong accent, but we do know that there's something, because Lou had been called out on having some sort of accent in his voice out in Iowa. Mm-hmm. So it's probably an element of that. Yeah.
Well, as somebody I'm from Ohio. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Ohio. And my kids were born here, and my husband's from here, and they make fun of my accent all the time. Mm-hmm. In fact, when we were talking to Mr. Black, he said "roof" like I said "roof," and I was like, "Yay!" He's a Midwestern guy like me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would love to have heard what they all sounded like talking around the table together.
Yeah.
It's so lovely.
We've been getting up at any time during the day that suits us best. Great fun. Friday, we got up at about noon, ate, dressed, and went to Philadelphia by trolley and subway. I was feeling worse when I got there than I did after the trip here. It was fun, though, and I think if I hadn't woke up with a headache, I'd have been okay. We window shopped, went to the stock exchange to see some of the fellows Lou worked for, saw Independence Hall, but it was locked, and we saw it only from the outside. We went to Horn and Hard Art Automat, and ate sandwiches and coffee before we went to the Earl Theater. We saw Kay Kaiser's movie Swing Fever, and on the stage, D'Artega and his all-girl orchestra and Bill Robinson. He told some pretty cute jokes and did several dances that were darn good. He certainly looks and acts younger than he actually is. I really enjoyed it. I managed, after consuming a box of aspirin, to get rid of my headache, and by the time we left, I was feeling the way I should have felt when we went in. We went to a nice Italian restaurant, to eat. The darn thing was downstairs, and as we ate, we listened to the cursed subway go rattling by. We were home by about 10 o'clock, and I was darn glad to go to bed.
Okay, so Sweetie's exploring in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. And she's got, her lovely husband to show her all the sights and to escort her. I bet he was like, oh, and this is here, and this is here, and this is here. And I bet he just loved it.
And his old buddies, we kind of get the sense that there could be some of his friends from around town that probably came to see him. We don't really get a note here, but yeah, he's definitely taking her around Philadelphia. Now, for those in Philadelphia, we know what the major sites are, but we're looking at our check boxes of things that, you got to do in Philly. Independence Hall, obviously, is a big stop. Yeah. And she has to go see that because, she's going to get a question. She's going to get interviewed by Chester about absolutely everything she's seen on the East Coast. We don't know that Chester's been to Philadelphia, but Independence Hall would be probably top of the list.
Oh,
right. So we definitely need to see that. Now, there are a couple of things here that are a bit more modern, obviously, that Sweetie is not doing. Some of them just simply didn't exist at the time she went. But for any of our listeners outside of Philadelphia, a lot of people like to run up the art museum steps because they want to be at the Rocky statue. And Rocky wasn't out yet.
Yeah, I think that's a little
time
bit
of this. So that's a little
after
her time. Yeah. But if you're looking at your mental checklist, like, ooh, what should I go see? Independence Hall. There's also a great new Museum of the American Revolution. There's actually a number of buildings around Independence Hall. Liberty Bell. I'm guessing that they saw the Liberty Bell. Now, the Liberty Bell is now in a pavilion, and they built this beautiful, beautiful display, and there's a whole lead up to walk up to the Liberty Bell. When I was a kid, you could just walk up to the bell. It was just kind of there in like a smaller pavilion. So we know when she went to it, you could probably just walk up to the Liberty Bell. And it's interesting that she doesn't comment on it, but I have to suspect, because it was so open to the public even when I was a kid, that they probably did. The Constitution Center that's now there had not been built yet. That was built in the 2000s. That's beautiful. So if you're traveling to Philadelphia today and you want to get that good dose of revolutionary history, don't limit yourself just to the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall. There's a lot in that area that's really, really wonderful. And actually, in the old Bank of the United States, there's an old bank building that has a portrait gallery. And in the portrait gallery are a ton of Charles Wilson Peale portraits of all of the founders. And one of them is Timothy Matlack, who is Lou's ancestor. So if you happen to be in Philadelphia at the right time when that's open, I still think it's probably free admission there. That's definitely, you can spend a day in the Independence Hall portion. But we know everybody wants to run up the steps, do the Rocky thing. Excellent. And then the other thing she doesn't mention is she doesn't get a cheesesteak, so we don't know what she ate, which is kind of interesting. Philly cheesesteaks. I was talking to our presidential candidate for the Libertarians. I picked him up at the Philadelphia airport. He had never been to Philadelphia before. Took him over to Independence Hall, and that was on the list. Was getting an authentic Philadelphia cheesesteak, and I can tell you right now, and he has said, we have now ruined cheesesteaks for him because he's from Atlanta area. Yeah.
He can never have another cheesesteak.
No, it's been ruined.
Pennsylvania.
Yep, it's totally been ruined. Yeah, so if you travel to Philly, outside of going to an Eagles game and all of the sports that's going on, Rocky statue, the Art Museum, the Franklin Institute, Independence Hall, all the things around it, please stop by the Museum of the American Revolution. Amazing, amazing stuff there. Get yourself a Philly cheesesteak. But right now, the only thing on Sweetie's list is, she has Horn and Hard Art. That's an old name, and 8 sandwiches and coffee. I'm all for sandwiches and coffee. But Independence Hall, obviously.
Saturday, we got up at about noon and were eating breakfast as Elizabeth came home from work. Elizabeth, Marguerite, Lou's mom, and I went to Springfield. Elizabeth wanted to see about buying a piano. It was a darn nice, well-cared-for upright that she could have had for $75, but she decided not to get it, I guess.
Yep. So, shopping.
She's with the women.
She's with the women out shopping.
Without the Lou. Mm-hmm. Ooh, I remember this. Yeah. I remember this. This is a very important thing because this is the first time that she's spending time alone with his mother and his sister and their sister-in-law. Like, sister-in-law. Yeah. So this is kind of a very important thing. Like they were definitely checking her out this time. And I'm sure she was very anxiety-inducing.
Yeah. Also, we look at the price. An upright piano at $75. Chester was going to buy that clock for over $200. So
this must have been a really crappy piano.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a great piano. Probably good.
Maybe it was just a really awesome clock. I don't know.
Yeah, it's either the clock was amazing. I guess it was that. Chester has good taste. So.
He does.
I came home, and I think I started this letter to you then, but the girls called me, and I went with them to do some shopping in Derby. When we got back, Bill Moore, a friend of Lou's, who's in the Navy at Washington, D.C., was there, and Lou and Bill were making plans to go out that night. We took baths, dressed, and Bill and Jeanne, there to be married April 15th, came at about 7:45. It's about a 20-minute ride to Philly from Lou's place. We parked the car in a parking lot and started down the street. We found standing lines outside the shows as bad as they get in Ottumwa, so rather than wait in line, we went to a couple of nightclubs to see the floor shows. One of them was a Negro quartet, the Four Keys. They were darn good, and of the two, I'd pick them as the best entertainment. The other was an old-time review that might have been good if it hadn't been that the MC seemed to take an unduly amount of glee out of telling off-color jokes. What made it more disgusting was the fact that he resembled David Chase a lot.
That makes me laugh so much. David Chase.
David Chase,
He just keeps coming back.
Just can't. Yeah.
I mean, I know he's not talking to, like, they're not talking to each other. Like, obviously, like, she hasn't talked to him.
Yeah.
But it's just funny that she's like, this really gross guy reminds me of David Chase.
Yeah. This not politically correct individual.
who an unduly amount of glee.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is David Chase just popping up again.
Mm-hmm. Still thinking a little bit about that, yeah.
When we went to get the car and came home, we found that the people were gone. There were a few cars sitting there. Bill's was not among them. So, what to do? We found a couple of cops in a car just roaming around. We told them, and they told us that the cars were taken to some garage on Pine. We went there and found it was the wrong garage, and we'd have to go to Sampson. 2 trolley rides before we found the darn car even. But it was a lot of fun in spite of it.
I actually wanted to pause here because this is like traditional Philly in my mind.
Is it really?
Yeah, because there was a show called Parking Wars that started in Philadelphia, and it was about just cars getting towed. It was like a reality show, and it was like the Philadelphia cars got towed, and then they went to the law, and everybody had to go get it. Now, I don't think this is really the same situation here, but I feel like all of a sudden I had like this imagery of like Parking Wars. And like the cops are just roaming around, and they went here and they had to go Pine Street, Sampson Street. This is all Center City, Philadelphia. A lot of the streets in Philadelphia are named after trees. So if you lose your bearings, Market Street's the center of Philadelphia, like 15th and Market is City Hall, basically. And there's a Market Street subway line. And there's also a street line that runs down Broadway. Not Broadway, wow. Broad Street. So like it's like north, south, east, west kinds of lines and things like that through the center of the city. But there's a Cherry Street, a Walnut Street, a Pine Street. So if you hear these names, it's Center City, Philadelphia. And it's,
you know where you're at.
Right. And these are one-way streets because Philadelphia, was grid lined out, back in the 1600s. So very much like an older city, one street, like this number goes this direction, this number, it's all in boxes. So you just go to the next street to make a loop around to be able to get to where you need to get to. Sampson Street is one of the smaller streets that's also Center City. There's actually, the Sampson Street Oyster House. So like this is like the older portion of the center part of Philadelphia. So if you're trying to kind of get your bearings as to where she was, she's in the vicinity of City Hall, basically, and in the center of the city here.
We got home quite late and had to get up early since we were going to go to Atlantic City, New Jersey. We left here at about 10:30 and got to the shore a little after 1. We parked the car close to 2 big hotels that are now used as convalescent hospitals for wounded soldiers. We walked about 2 miles along the boardwalk, and though it was a little cold, it was surprising how many people there were. That place is like a perpetual carnival. Knickknacks, costume jewelry, people of all kinds just milling about. We left the boardwalk and walked down to the water's edge. We took some pictures, but there was no sun, and it is possible that they'll be no good. We bought a few little souvenirs for the kids. For us, we bought some vases that I think are really pretty. We had dinner at a nice cafe on the boardwalk, and because the wind had come up and it looked a little rainy, we left at 7 o'clock and were home at 9:45.
Yeah, so I guess Elizabeth gave up the car.
I guess. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yep. Mm-hmm. They wanted to see the shore. Sweetie, working at that Navy base, finally gets to see the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I bet there's real shore patrolmen there.
Yeah, there's actual shore patrol.
Fake shore patrolmen in Iowa.
So, but no run-ins with the shore patrol, no button issues in this episode of the Love Sweetie podcast. One thing is I have not seen any indication that the photos survived, so they probably didn't turn out well, and she probably got
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
I was looking, but I haven't seen anything that's like a 40s like hazy picture of the shore.
Monday, we stayed in bed till nearly noon. Got up and I cooked our breakfast while Lou's mom and Pop and Marguerite went to the show. Then I washed and pinned up my hair and sat to dry it. While Lou held the little dryer, I wrote on this letter to you. I aimed to get it done then, but so many things come up at once that I had to put it off. Besides, Lou was teasing me more than he was drying my hair, and since we were invited to a friend of Elizabeth's, I had to finish drying my hair and dress in a hurry. We spent a nice evening playing cards and listening to a man who put his whole heart and soul into a loud guffaw at the slightest provocation. The only trouble was that we just couldn't get away, and were planning on a trip to New York the next day, Tuesday. It was 12 before we started to leave, and it was at least 12:30 before we got gone, and it was 1:30 before I put my hair up again and got to bed. We got up at 8. We got up at 8 and left for New York on the 10:29 train. It is a little more than an hour and a half ride that takes us through the Holland Tunnel.
So this is unexpected because she hadn't written in any of the previous letters that they were planning it. They were just hoping to get to the shore and borrow the car. But Sweetie's going to get to see a little bit of New York City as well on this trip. So I can only imagine.
She's really packing it all in.
Yeah, she's taking full advantage of this time off to see things, which just means more questions from Chester about what everything looks like.
We first tried finding a hotel room. Some fun. The big-name hotels were filled to the gills, and so we found one not too nice and swanky, but very conveniently located just off Times Square. It was just 1 o'clock when we left the hotel and started walking, and it was 5:30 or 5:45 when we went back to the hotel to dress. During that time, we walked from 42nd Street, where the hotel is, down to 26th Street. All the time, we were walking down New York's 5th Avenue, and then we went over to Park Avenue and walked all the way back up to 58th Street. We saw so many things and people. I can't tell you all about it now.
Sorry, we don't get the coverage of all of the New York story, and the letter did not. I have not come across the letter in which she detailed this. If she detailed this, it may have just been conversation about the New York trip, but she gives a little bit of a location. 42nd Street made me play 42nd Street in my mind, from the Broadway. The hotel that they even got a hotel room right off of Times Square. Oh, I can only imagine. Yeah. I love some of these old hotels in New York are really amazing. Now, when I took my trip out to Iowa to be in the places Sweetie was at, I decided to go out of my way to try to stay a night in a hotel at a building that was there when she was there. So I'd have like the sense that she would have walked past it or seen it. So every hotel we stayed in, from the hotel in Davenport, which I think is the Black Hawk, and the Surety Hotel, I think it's the Surety Hotel out in Des Moines, which was an old bank that had been converted from like the early 1900s. I knew these buildings were here, but I can only imagine she's staying at probably something today that is probably revered if it's still standing in Times Square. And now, beaucoup dollars to stay at.
I'm
sure. For sure. Yeah.
I mean, even like back then, like, oh my gosh, like Times Square.
Yep.
Yeah,
Times Square,
I was there one time. I was like, that's enough.
Yeah.
That's enough.
It's a lot.
But like for her to like get a place like right next to it and be able to like experience that.
Yeah. And also to experience just the population density, right? So she's traveling through all this population density. Her family's in Lacona, like population like 400 people still to this day, somewhere around that. Ottumwa City in Iowa. Okay. Then Chicago. Okay. We're at the train station, not seeing all of Chicago, but still very densely packed. Then Philly. Then we see the shore, and then you go to New York City, and you just imagine the bustle on the streets and being like, okay, it's going to be interesting going back to the pace in Iowa as opposed to the pace, there seems to be a faster pace on the East Coast.
There is.
Sometimes I think that leads to some of our stress on the East Coast. We talk faster. I think I don't want to say, what's the best way to say it? I think we're more stressed because of sort of like the frantic pace. And I think this is why in areas that are not as dense in population, there's that idea about Southern hospitality. Things are slowed down a little bit, where you can just enjoy.
Yes. Definitely like being in New York, everybody walks fast. And when you're like, as a tourist, when I went, I've been in New York a few times and our friends lived there.
Yep.
And he's like, we would walk place. We went to Central Park and they were like 2 blocks ahead of us. I'm like, why are you going so fast?
Yeah.
Why is everybody going so fast?
Yeah. It's a different.
But then you go down south. And like in Alabama, I've been to Alabama, and it's like really slow.
Yeah.
It is the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of it's the heat, but also like
Yeah.
the culture. Like, why would you
Right.
rush to do anything? Yeah, definitely in the Northeast.
Right.
Like there is and especially on the East Coast, there is a much faster pace.
And you can hear it with the speech too.
Oh yeah.
The talking, the fast-paced East Coast speed rate of speaking versus other areas. So I have to imagine just how she's feeling coming from the Midwest, that Iowa has to feel almost a little sleepy, even when it's busy compared to, the bustle of like New York City and Philadelphia. And I find it funny that in a previous part of this letter, she wrote like, oh, the lines here are as big as they are in Ottumwa. Sweetie, it's all of Philly. That's everywhere. This is the East Coast you're on. So she's still like, oh, it's as busy as Ottumwa. Yo, it's busy. There's a lot more people here. So,
Is that what you thought when you read that? Let me do that.
But here it is Wednesday. Lou's still asleep, but we've got to get up, dressed, and do a little shopping and get back to Philadelphia to go to a luncheon with Lou's Aunt Stell, and so we've got to stop. I started this letter so long ago, I'm almost ashamed to send it, and yet it shows that I did think of you, and go back to it at intervals. Bob's idea of waiting till you get home to write a travelogue is the best idea, but I thought I should write something that would get to you before I get home. We leave Philadelphia Friday p.m. I'm not sure about the time, but we get into Ottumwa on Saturday at 4 p.m., and then to work, and oh, how I dread it. This has been nicer than any honeymoon could be. Lou has been so much fun that it seems almost as though we've just been married, and it makes it just that much nicer. Only one thing. I keep thinking how much Jeanne would enjoy it, and I'm sorry she isn't here. Love, Sweetie.
Yeah. She misses her sister.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is her honeymoon.
Yeah, it's unofficially. They are going to take an official one, yeah, but at least for now, it's satisfying. She got to go somewhere, she got to see something, and that's exciting for her.
Yeah. And I mean, that was that was very, like, it was out of character. It was like definitely something that she'd never done before. Oh, it's just amazing to me. I mean, I've been to DC, I've been to all these places because, we can travel. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, I'm sad that she obviously left a lot of stuff out of this letter. Mm-hmm. But she, when she went home, they were just like, tell us.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Everything. Show us everything. And the pictures that they must have taken, because we know there's the camera at the beach, so there must have been camera photos of other things. Now, I do have a couple pictures to show here. Just so we can bring these up, because I think it's important that we see 936 Springfield Road, the house that she talked about. She describes it as, I think, the fireplace in every room.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Amazing thing. So now this building no longer exists, and I think it's a Dunkin' Donuts now. So, yeah, but
we should go.
Yeah, let's go.
We're gonna go.
This is what used to be here, and I know we have a few pieces of the house that still survive. Actually, my dad it's like my dad's been secretly keeping things around, but now that it's come up, he's like, oh yeah, that's from here, and I'm like, what? That's been there my whole life, and I never knew that was there. And I'll tell you what it is. It's an exterior portion here, but this is the house of 936 Springfield Road. Mm-hmm. So this is a side view of it, and it's a pretty rough picture, but we can get an idea of the size, right? We've got like 3 stories here at 936. We've got 3 trees very close to the house, kind of surprisingly close.
Yeah, that's not safe.
That doesn't look like a good idea. What you can notice is we've got this on the left-hand side. There's a pillar behind this tree. And this is really more of the front of the house. This is the porch. So we remember Yeah, we remember the picture of Samuel sitting out on the porch. Mm-hmm. And we can see the yard. I'm expecting that he was sitting in this portion because behind is a fence. And actually, that brings up another idea. We've seen the photo of the kids.
Yeah, they have a fence.
With the fence.
Yeah.
So that's
a fence. And there's a fence here you can see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm pointing to the picture. You guys can't tell.
Yeah.
I always, I actually think about our audio listeners,
Yeah.
and I'm so grateful for you.
Oh,
and I'm
yes.
really trying to be more descriptive and not just
Yeah.
So, but this is a really cool, and it's a very big house.
Very big house. So we're dealing with a 3-story house. Not really clear on basement or if this was more of like a cellar or they'd have some sort of exterior storage and things like that. But on the first floor, we have at least 4 windows and a door. So it looks like there's a front room. It also looks like there was an extension on this house.
Yeah, so
There's an original
this was
portion.
built later on. This is very typical. This was actually, my friend has a house just like this that's like that rectangle.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking with the door here
That's probably
on the side,
the
that's the
original.
kitchen.
Yeah.
You would have to be able to go in and out to cook and stuff. Yeah.
Yep. And then 5 windows above, all with shutters. And then it looks like an attic portion, a 3rd floor over one section, a third floor over the other. So it's 3 floors all the way up.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to get a view on the width of this. I have another picture from another angle here so we can get a view of the size of this. But fireplaces in every room. And what's really, really interesting is when my dad decided to design the blueprints for the house that I grew up in. So we're the only family that's lived in it. And there's a particular thing to know about chimneys. And you'll notice there's chimneys a lot in revolutionary homes. If you're in Pennsylvania, you can distinguish in architecture chimneys in the center of a building versus chimneys on the side of the building. So a lot of people have always seen like the chimney on the side of the building in the Mid-Atlantic, right? Because they're heating, and there's usually like a chimney, a fireplace in one, and maybe one above in the house above. In New England, the chimneys are more in the center of the home to do the central heat. So this is more typical for Pennsylvania, where we can see, and for the audio listeners, the chimney's more to the side of the roof. So that's very Mid-Atlantic. Now my dad actually liked the New England style. So he built like a Mid-Atlantic for like air circulation. He's getting this from Chester. So he designed it, but he picked up the New England style of putting the fireplace in the center. But that's unusual for the Mid-Atlantic. Mid-Atlantic, you'd have the chimney more closer to the wall here. So that's one of the pictures. And then we have a nice picture here. I'm going to open up the next one. All right. And we also get a sense of the scale. And this is from the front. And this is why I wanted to show the one picture first, so that we could sort of get our bearings. So this is the porch in the front portion, and there's a chair there. It's probably where Samuel took it. This is Sydney in the front of the house, and we get an idea of the width. So it's another 3 or 4 windows wide. So there's probably at least either a big salon or a big living room or a double. And then I believe that's Marguerite. I don't think that's Betty Elizabeth standing behind her. I think that's Marguerite, but definitely Sydney.
Oh yeah, we know that's Sydney for sure.
Even in a blurry look, you can see Sydney's stern face in the middle of the picture. But this is the front of 936. Now, the item that was saved from here that's not pictured is there used to be a big big planter out front, and it's probably I'm like describing, I'm waving with my hands. It's like 24 inches wide or so, terracotta planter. And just recently, even my mom didn't know this, that planter had been at Springfield Road. So my whole life it's been sitting out on the patio, and it was from the property at 936. And he said, no, that's a very old planter, terracotta, that's outside. And it's still holding plants, it's doing its job. But it's nice to have just one little piece of the property out on the patio is from Springfield Road. But I figured everybody would want to see the house. And then we have one other item to show, because I'm going to be working on some bonus content on this. We talked about the A coupons for the gas rations, which I guess Elizabeth finally allowed for some sharing here of the gas rations. And so just so people could see this, because a lot of them are numbered. When we go into that bonus content on rations, we'll go into it. But this is what they look like. And I managed to pick up some of these. This is the A unit. So we can see here, this is what they would have issued for the gas to get there. And just give you an idea of the scale, because these look very large. I have them right here. So they're small. Imagine
about
like
the size of a 3x5 index card.
Yeah, you can fit like 8 of them on the 3x5. Nicely preserved. I found these on eBay. I thought it was really nice. They're they're not canceled, they're not used or anything like that, but very much like stamps. So you'd take your stamp, and then, so she was asking Chester a couple episodes ago, hey, can I borrow some more of the gas coupons? So he probably, provided a few of these, because you could save these up to get the gas to take the trip to Atlantic City. So that's what that would look like.
And I wonder, this, just thinking about it now, like, I wonder what the gas mileage was like for some of these cars.
Yeah.
Like, did they get really good gas mileage? I bet they get like 60, 70
from
miles
the 40s. I'll have to ask my dad. He has a 48 Plymouth. But if you're a car, the car people are gonna know this. Put it in the comments of the video. Please let us know. What was mileage like?
I'd love to know like what this bought you.
Yeah. How far could you go with this? That's a great question. So we'll have to look into that some more. But yeah, I thought we wanted to see that. And that wraps up that letter. Sweetie's back in Ottumwa. But we do have one other little letter for the end of the episode here. I'm just going to let it play. And this is actually from Lou. So we get to hear Lou's voice again.
March 22, 1944. Miss Jeanne Demery, 2312 Cottage Grove, Des Moines, Iowa. Dear Jeanne, here we are back in Ottumwa, and what a swell time we had. But just like everything, it had to end. Oh well, 1945 is coming. I believe you have most of the details from Sweetie's letter, but if you'll come and visit us, we will give you the real lowdown. Kay and I just said last night, and I quote, I wish Jeanne were here, so do I, unquote. See if you can tear yourself away from the daily grind and come on down. My next 48 is Saturday and Sunday on the 1st and 2nd of April. We are going to Lacona, I think. Kay said something about it, but I'm not sure. Maybe we will see you then. Thanks for the St. Patty's card. Sure and yea, shouldn't have done it. I've run out of words, so I better stop now before I run into the Gettysburg Address. Love, Sweetie Pie and Louie Gooey. Say hello to all the Boltons for me.
Yeah.
I love him so much.
Yeah,
I just don't know how to tell you. That is the most wonderful thing ever. And I love that Lou took the time to write to Jeanne, just like, I love Sweetie's letter. Oh, so much stuff, and we got this, and we were up at this time, and this and that. And he's like, hey, it was super fun. Can't wait to see you again.
45's on its way. Yeah, what? Dude, you're in March. It's a little ways off. It's not like October. So
yeah, it was such a sweet thing for him to do. I mean, obviously Jeanne was an incredibly important part of their life.
Yeah.
And we can see that they all loved each other very much. But I love that he took this little time to like make sure, hey, we missed you and we would love to see you again.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we've got a couple artifacts from Lou that I've been going through the boxes, and I can show them to everyone on the screen here. In one of the boxes was a box marked Lou. It had been tucked in the attic for a long time. I had never seen this, and I was very curious. One of the things here is with such packed boxes of family things, I was very, very careful to look at the things that are even very plain just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And I was really happy that I did that, because we do have what appears to be Lou's wedding ring that was in one of the boxes. So I'm going to bring it up on the screen, and this will be on the website as well. It's inscribed on the inside. So I was really trying to carefully work it out. And it says KFG, which is Catherine Francis, K. Francis Graham. So that's Sweetie. To LSG, Louis Sidney Graham. And then the date, if I were to wrap this ring around, and I'll take some different angles of it, it says 12/3/1943. And it has 53 in another inscription there. So I think what happened is he probably wore it for about 10 years. They do get concerned at a certain point that the gold is going to start to wear, and he's working, he's Navy, he's mechanic, he's doing all this kind of stuff. So they probably put it away and switched it out to make sure that it would not be damaged. This gold wedding ring, obviously dated from the date in Ottumwa, is really, really beautiful. I did get a case for it, which is meant for like sports rings, but it sits up here very nicely on the shelf, so it can be displayed, and it fits nicely there. I don't know yet. I'll have to talk to my dad about Sweetie's ring, but at least we do have Lou's ring here. And there's going to be some more content on some of Lou's artifacts coming up. I do have his dog tags They were also in the box. So we have that as well. Dad was telling some stories about dog tags. Maybe we'll let him talk about, how they would work and why there's a chip in it. I think people that know military history are going to know about there's an indent that they used in World War II and how those worked. But the ring, just having the ring. There was another item in the box as well. And here we have the crest that Chester made.
And if people who listen would remember this from an episode where Lou was putting it on. He put it up.
He was putting it in the wall. Here's the hole from when he pounded it into the wall. Yeah, Chester. Now this is the red. I'd mentioned when I was looking at the crest before, the Demery crest is supposed to be, Demarest is supposed to have red, and I got it custom done in blue. This is the traditional, and with the 3 scallop shells as well, and the cross here. But yeah, here's where it would have been nailed into the wall, and this would have been the wedding gift. No inscription on the back or anything like that, but handmade by Chester. So we're gonna get that hanging up there. So, but other than that, that's it for today's episode. We finally, Sweetie got to see Philadelphia. Sweetie got to meet the in-laws. Check. Anxiety over? Probably not. It's Sweetie. So there's going to be some anxiety about something coming up.
But this end too, I think we do need to recognize that this is episode 20.
Episode 20. Yep.
Episode 20. And it was a very lovely episode. Such a culmination of like the relationship that Lou and Sweetie have forged, like her life, moving from Parsons to Ottumwa.
Yep.
And meeting Lou and stuff. It's a very nice. I really love that this fell on episode 20.
Oh yeah, it's a milestone. Yeah. It's a milestone for us. It's a milestone for her. Yeah, really wonderful. Especially if you're audio only and you want to see pictures of Springfield Road, definitely go to the www.lovesweetiepodcast.com website. Go into the photo albums. Parts of the website have been revamped to include more information about the family tree, and there's now a glossary in there for some other items like NIS Ottumwa, things like that. Definitely check it out. But we very much appreciate all of our listeners. We've started to get some fan mail, I would say, which is really, really beautiful. It's been very lovely. Some really positive reviews coming out. If you can leave a review, great. But thank you to those who have. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until next week.
All right, we'll see you next week.
Bye.